The Berrigan brothers, Philip and Daniel, Roman Catholic priests, Philip of the Josephite order, and Daniel was a Jesuit. And actually, I mean, they both say this many, many times. It makes you realize how important Dorothy Day was, and the Catholic worker. They both attribute their radicalization to that organization, primarily, kind of, or fundamentally. She really had an effect on a lot of people, and through them, on a lot of other people. Now, they were the two youngest of six brothers from Minnesota originally, but raised in Western Massachusetts. I guess I kept running into them one way or another. I think Philip Berrigan talked to my high school, my little peacenik hippie high school in D.C. in the early 70s and or mid 70s. And the Berrigans were very present. I think most of their lives were spent in the D.C. Baltimore area, but they just seemed to be really present in that region where I grew up and when I grew up. All right, now Philip was the youngest of the six, and Daniel, when World War II came, Daniel was already studying for the priesthood and intending not to fight for all the reasons that were invented or developed, from the Sermon on the Mount and the Catholic worker. But Philip did go serve as well as all the older brothers did as well. And I guess one account is Philip's of this whole experience and how that led him toward pacifism and toward Daniel. I mean, I guess just to introduce a little more, before I left basic training, my brother invited me to visit the Jesuit novitiate at Poughkeepsie. Daniel wanted me to think a little harder about going to war, and he arranged for me to take a 4-day retreat at St. Andrews. The rector provided me with, and like I say, my stepfather was a conscientious objector in World War II, and also dealt with his brother, who did serve in both the European and Pacific fronts. So it's a similar, one brother served and one refused. The rector provided me with the exercises of St. Ignatius, and I walked alone praying for guidance, trying to decide what to do. Should I ask for a deferment of military service? Should I agree to enter the seminary and begin to study for the priesthood? What did God have in mind for me? I didn't really want to be a priest, and I longed to, although he spent his life as a priest, and I longed to join my older brothers, or much of his life. I longed to join my older brothers at the battlefront. I wanted to join the hunt for Hitler, to hack him to pieces, and to count the demons as they flew from his wounds. Now, one thing I'm going to say about both Philip and Daniel, they're better writers than they need to be. They're real good. Maybe especially Daniel, who was quite a well-known poet, but both of them, very compelling and continuously surprising in their formulations. Again, maybe especially Daniel. But, I mean, reading either of them, and I've been reading a lot of them in these two books, The Ministry of Risk, Writings on Peace and Nonviolence by Philip Berrigan, and this one, Daniel Berrigan Essential Writings. And like I say, it's you know, you'll run on for a few sentences where you're going like, yeah, uh-huh. And then it'll hit you with something really awesomely surprising and like sort of a difficult moral insight that either of them is willing to go all the way into. They're brave as writers, personal writers and ethical writers and religious writers. I wanted to charge pillboxes, blow up machine gun nests, and fight hand to hand with my country's enemies. I was 19 years old, willing and most able to be a warrior. Yeah, tall, handsome young man, by all accounts. I became an expert marksman with a 37 millimeter anti-tank gun, an obsolete weapon, but the best we had for our training. I went to infantry OCS, Officer Candidate School, at Fontainebleau. I was assigned to the 8th Infantry Division, a hardcore combat unit that had already fought its way across northern France and on into Germany, stopping close to the Danish border. When I graduated from OCS, I was a skilled killer, trained in the use of all small arms, clever with a bayonet, good with a submachine gun, and the Browning automatic rifle. That's exactly what I was, a highly skilled young killer. And then some reflection. In Catholic Church and parochial schools, I had learned that God created human beings in His own image and that all human beings carry the divine within us. In order to kill other men and women, I needed to make them less human. I needed to become anesthetized. More, I had to believe that I would never become one of those mutilated things. I'm not like them. God was on my side. Unlike them, I was blessed, surrounded by the armor of pure goodness. I had come to Europe to do a job that I thought would involve great danger. The more death I faced, the better off the world would be. I needed to keep proving that I wasn't just an ordinary soldier. I was Philip the Bold, son of Thomas the Brave. He was also a veteran, I think. Toughest Irish-American kid on the block. More ignorant, I know now, than brave. I helped free the world from Hitler's reign of terror. I served my country in wartime because I thought that's what patriots do. God may tell us not to kill, but when the state calls, we must obey. We must become skilled, remorseless killers, willing to use any means to defeat the enemy. Years after my return from the killing fields, I looked into the mirror of my own violence. What I saw there forced me to rethink and redefine the meaning of sanity. He felt himself to have been sane, but looking back, he believes he was insane. I realized that while I considered Adolf Eichmann a war criminal and despised him for participating in the Holocaust, we actually had a few things in common. Like him, I had only been following orders. Like him, I was sane enough to do my duty and do it well. Like him, I believed that wars are fought for noble reasons. We were both true believers, one a mass murderer, Eichmann, and the other a killer on a smaller scale. When I first started thinking about these things, my heart turned to stone. My head swam with clouds of confusion. Examining my own responsibility for the death of 70 million people in World War II, it occurred to me that the U.S. government, and I as a soldier, had adopted some of the worst aspects of Nazism. The Luftwaffe bombed London, so we had a right to firebomb Dresden. The Germans murdered civilians en masse, so we were entitled to slaughter their women and children. Our actions were not crimes against humanity. They were retaliation for their crimes. Their actions were barbaric. My actions were just. I vacillated between feeling betrayed in the sense that I was betraying some sacred trust, some sacrosanct ideal. When I'm looking back now at my own actions, I saw a boy standing on the field of battle, bristling with weapons, preparing to shed his blood and spill the blood of his enemies for his king, his emperor, his state, some grand everlasting ideal. An ancient figure, stooped with the knowledge that the killing had gone on for centuries and could well continue until the end of time. The boy took off his helmet. I could see the pain in his eyes, see that he wanted to lay down his sword and shield, but that he feared the consequences. It was one thing to die on the field of battle, quite another to be banished into the realm of cowards. I reached out to him and found myself. We walked together, this ancient young warrior and I, knowing that the road we were taking would be lonely, even more dangerous than the battlefield had been. No one would recognize us when we returned home. There would be no welcome for traitors who break their swords into pieces, leaving their armor and their weapons down by the riverside. And really, it was an extraordinary life. And both Berrigan brothers were in and out of prison. In fact, Daniel Berrigan might be the only priest, Roman Catholic priest, to ever been on the FBI's most wanted list. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's somewhat unusual anyway. Like he didn't show up for his court dates and stuff like this at times. Refused to stand trial. Went into exile in Peru and elsewhere for a while. On the run, underground. The peacenik priest. Yeah, I mean, okay, so they're famous. Philip was a member of the Baltimore Four, who took draft records, went into a draft office, grabbed draft records, and poured blood all over them. Their own blood. During Vietnam, of course. Philip participated in that, but not Daniel, because he had been arrested the day before at the Pentagon demonstration. That amazing demonstration where they attempted, in '67, where they attempted to levitate the Pentagon. And I think they did. That was an amazing event. People holding hands and levitating the Pentagon. But whether they did that or not, they certainly put flowers into rifles and things like this at the Pentagon that day. So Daniel was already in jail, so he couldn't participate in the destroy the draft records action. But he did participate in the next one, famously the Catonsville Nine, who grabbed records at the draft office in Catonsville, took them out in the parking lot, and lit them up with napalm. These are very, very pointed, and I will say nonviolent actions. Okay, but the actions of people who are really, really disaffected and really very urgent about stopping this unjust war. I mean, one thing about both Philip and Daniel and their pacifism, they're almost obsessed with the means-ends distinction. That violence requires this separation of means and ends, that it's often justified by a separation of means and ends. But that if our end is peace, we must live peace every day. There cannot be a warlike achievement of peace. Right? And they both viewed this as a profound spiritual commitment to live as we profess. Simple as that. The means-ends distinction. And also, they're very, very clear over and over again about rejecting teleological ethics and observing absolute prohibitions. And again, this is maybe not that surprising for Catholic priests or whatever. Right? I thought I'd give you a little bit of Daniel. He does this in. They were active in the King movement and many other movements in the 60s. This is a piece called The Alternative of Nonviolence, where he runs through some of the basic features of his commitment and describes how he came to it. This is Daniel Berrigan. Through the long course of Gandhi's struggle, both in South Africa and in India, he kept insisting with the simplest of people and the most sophisticated of political opposition that the means and ends are so closely joined that the purity of the end can only be measured by the purity of the means. This was the marvelous undercurrent of the whole movement, the Gandhi movement. The means were never allowed to foreshorten the end or to bring the end any closer by themselves becoming impure. There were no shortcuts to Gandhi's spiritual goal. The whole wearying and troublesome and anguished way must be undergone step by step, because the purity of the means was so closely related to the purity of the goal that one built the purity of the end by undergoing the journey. He went on to say that anything is possible to a people if they keep this in mind, and that nothing was possible, that the whole idea of the pure end could be destroyed with very great speed once the means become unimportant or ambiguous or impure. This is, of course, always a danger, as we know from our own movements here, that the violent means will be seized on as a way of foreshortening the human struggle. Maybe in a few statements we can sum up what we've been trying to say so far. First of all, a nonviolent movement proceeds from a personal conversion. Martin Luther King Jr. has certainly adopted this. Many others have undergone profound personal conversions, either in the beginning or during the course of the struggle, and certainly Daniel and Philip Berrigan thought of themselves like that. Second, nonviolence proceeds from an inspired faith or refusal into a positive stance in the world. Proceeds from an inspired faith of refusal to a positive stance in the world. So it insists on being within history and will not allow itself to be shunted off into some sort of sectarianism or extremism before others. So it is constantly trying to keep its roots in the actual community, even though it must, in a certain sense, stand apart by its refusal. So it's going to be practical, and it's going to be collectively oriented, and you need to concentrate on that at every moment. And you know, they were building a movement. Third, this nonviolence sees itself as at its best as indivisible, and at its least as potentially universal. That is, as a way of life that is simply human. In the nuclear age, it is the only alternative to the escalation of genocide and universal incineration. So you always note among the responsible people both a profound spiritual root and a profound political responsibility. Fourth, a difficult point. A nonviolent movement must be content with long-range vindication and be conceived of as a long-range hope for change. Thus, in the past, we can see it identifying itself with the end of feudalism, or with the hope of the workers in Europe, or with the anti-colonial movement in Africa and the East. So he's envisioning a worldwide movement, peace movement. So we are speaking here of the mystique in action, a mystique which has become a public technique. We have to look not merely to the quality of the men and women involved, but to the realization that an idea has met its hour. This is the glory of nonviolent history, that it has had this kind of visionary sense of the times they are a-changing, as the song goes, and what the change means, where it is leading, where it can be invaded, where it's vulnerable. Thus, an individual or small group must be seen, not so much in negative terms, as people in jail or picket lines or people under the censure of society, as in Cesar Chavez on the picket line. They must be seen as a positive offering to history, as connected with the most profound political and social change, the amelioration of humanity's despair. Yes, I'm more and more sweaty because it is very hot today here in Rappahannock County, Virginia. I mean, it's an amazingly profound authorship that I didn't know until I just started reading this. All right, here's something he wrote when he was in exile. Cuernavaca, Mexico. The important thing was not that injustice had happened to me. The important thing was that injustice had occurred at all. And this is like a very profound point that they both make over and over again. Like, nonviolence shows us to be one. Right? It's not what happens to me, it's what happens to us. That injustice was still possible, an evil of this kind, the defeat of good work, the silencing of truth. This bit deep to realize on the arrests and everything. But the purification of evil was the most important thing of all. First of all, in myself, the evil in myself, very typical self-reflection. Neither bitterness nor vengeful thoughts, not even malingering around the idea of personal vindication. The desire for purification must advance into the possibility of creating purity in others, and especially in systems of authority which had become the persecutor, and in that measure were impure. So this, maybe it starts with a personal commitment, but it's a collective commitment, okay? And it's an anti-authoritarian commitment. Religious commitment, spiritual commitment. We seek a morality which builds itself from a convergence of values. Lives press in on us, and we are powerless to remain unconscious of them. They pour out on us their cries of lives betrayed, soul neglected. Gaza now, maybe. To construct our conscience from such lives, to construct a conscience from such lives, from the living. One must accept the ironies of life and take up the tasks of life. Disgraced or not, foolish or wise, living in ill times or good, we are what we are. And we are where we are. The actual world is our only world. Now this is interesting because this is such a deep spiritual commitment. And it's so, they're so committed to the kingdom of God and stuff like this. But there is this declaration in both of them, especially Daniel, over and over again, of realism. This is the real world. The things, bad things that are happening, they're not like a little bit of the tale of redemption, okay? They're not a story we're telling. These are actual things happening to actual people in the real world. And I'm not saying that we should transcend this world and engage in to have a spiritual into the kingdom of God. I'm saying that we engage in this world totally from a place of nonviolence. The actual world is our only world. We must go forward. We must accept all that people say to us, however painful or unfair it be. The times allow no delay. Life grants us no space for idleness, regrets, or the pursuit of illusions. The mystery of the cross, it is the mystery of this war. It is the mystery of this war, which has destroyed so many lives, including the moral lives of those who destroy. And Philip felt that about himself. This is Daniel, though. A war that has now reached perilously into my own life and destroyed its former shape. He's on the run. He's underground. Deflected its energies, disrupted its friendships, made of my life an occasion of division instead of the sign of unity I had hoped for. And this is true of Daniel. He's always reflecting on his own actions. He comes back to the fact that he had to do, these anti-war things, and that, and he's doing them with us for everyone. But he also sees that the peace movement that he helped spearhead has created divisions, even though all he wanted was unity. And he does a lot of self-reflecting about, is what I'm doing right, not just in a superficial way. Or is it, is it backfiring? So here's like a typical, sort of profound Daniel Berrigan passage. So there is a problem of evil, and there is a mystery of evil. The first is the product of history, the problem of evil. Explainable to history. Why does God permit so much evil in the world? Explainable to history. Assuaged to a degree within history. Its nature is not of formal interest to me, the problem of evil. Or let me just say, such evil could not create me as a human being, any more than it could destroy me as a human being. The evil of Satan or the evil of the world could not have created me, and it cannot destroy me. It can awaken energies or render them lax and lazy. Its omnipresence can arouse compassion or despair. It can send my hand to my pocket or send me on a conventional religious mission. It can command gestures without content, the problem of evil or fighting evil. Again, the self-reflection is really intense. But its power over me goes only so far into my eyes or skin or soul as to leave them intact, neither greatly offended nor painfully awakened. I remain what I am, though a beggar is before me, though an accident occurs down the street. I sit in the sunlight, I continue with my dinner. My moral life takes food and drink, hears and sees and breathes the air of the world, evacuates its poisons. I remain a good intellectual animal, an approved domesticated specimen, a moral neutral. I deal inoffensively with the world. It offers me no reason for acting as anything but a colorless civil servant. But to live in truth, as Václav Havel, for example, also put it soon after. Another matter entirely. So different a matter, in fact, and so different in order, that it raises questions of truth to another plane, sheds upon them an altogether unexpected radiance. You can hear he's a poet, actually. Grants them a new parabola of experience upon which to draw. To be concrete, is it better, in defense of the truth, for us to be in community in New York, exploring with others the questions that animate us, drawing on the resources concentrated there to protest evil, to uncover alternatives of life? Or is it better to be thrown back upon oneself abroad, as he writes, leaving our past like a diminishing wake, a memory that is freshened only by occasional flummery, by occasional flutters? It is hard to answer. Perhaps it is useless to attempt to answer, for if either activity is valid as a human contribution, it must be true that both the range of life is in fact being extended, and that we are living the truth for others. We are not wasting or violating life in either circumstances, nor are we turning selfishly or surreptitiously to our own ends. So if you stick there with Daniel and take the punishment, I think that, your suffering is meaningful. But if you go into exile, I think your suffering is also meaningful, all right, if you make it so. Well, that's the astonishing Berrigan brothers. Now I think there'll only be one or two more. I think I'm going to do one on Gene Sharp, really interesting intellectual of nonviolence, and I think I'll finish with Judith Butler. So those will be coming.